Defense Secretary Gotabaya Rajapaksa, who is the Sri Lankan president's brother. It is a fact that the Indian High Commission in Sri Lanka is worried about this development. Now, up till 2014, Rajapaksa was dealing with Manmohan Singh. Thereafter, for the last 5 months, he's dealing with a different Prime Minister. And this Prime Minister takes a much more robust view of India's interests and asserts them in a more robust fashion. But here, where you're hearing different opinions, Mr. K.C. Singh, about how we should respond, what do you think would be the right response from Mr. Modi to these two Chinese submarines visiting Colombo?
I think the submarine, as we all agree, a visit by a submarine by itself at this point is not necessarily threatening, but it is a thin end of a wedge. It's the beginning of what may turn out to be a larger presence in future. And that is not in our interest. I think that is where we have to tilt the balance in favor of India. We have lost leverage in Sri Lanka after they've managed to eliminate LTTE. We have to build new leverages. And those leverages have not been built since in the last 4 or 5 years. The only leverage you have is the vote in Geneva.
Okay.
And that's not much of a leverage at the Human Rights Council. So you have to have actual leverages, as I said, alternatives to Colombo, opening up the Park Straits, exerting other pressure, putting some incentives like we'll develop Trincomalee or we'll drink. You have to go with a package. And then that is how you project your power.
Okay.
And you cannot allow the Chinese to have a greater influence in Colombo than you have. They can subsist with you.
I take your point.
But you can't allow them to have greater influence.
Let me bring in very quickly Ajay Shukla for the last question before I have to end this particular discussion. We're talking about building leverages. We're talking about perceiving the submarines visiting Colombo port in the wider context of not just India-China, but more importantly, India-Sri Lanka relations. To what extent is the central government's hands adversely tied by Tamil politicians who insist on an anti-Rajapaksa line, who insist on a pro-LTTE line, when China is freely able to take the opposite stand? To what extent, therefore, is the central government bound down and bogged down by Tamil politics when it comes to Sri Lanka relations? A quick answer.
Well, I would like to believe that they are not bound down by Tamil politics, but are acting morally and acting in defense of human rights. India has a certain set of values and standards in accordance with which it must act internationally. I think that this entire argument that India must sell out its entire value systems in order to accept depredations by the rulers of neighboring states, whether it's Myanmar or it's Sri Lanka, is incorrect. I think India's leverages stem not from pandering to totalitarian regimes or repressive regimes, but from proximity, from close relationships, from the very deep defense relationship that we have with Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, most of their military is trained in India. There's a very close relationship between the two militaries, and regardless of what you might hear in the public dialogue, the reality is that there is a closer relationship and closer coordination than you would like to believe.
All right, that will have to be the last word on this particular discussion. My thanks to my 4 guests for joining me. My apologies that we lost Kamal Sibal. That was particularly regrettable because he was the one man in the panel who in fact took a very seriously adverse view of the visit of the Chinese submarines to the Colombo port. The others were much more nuanced in their arguments, so his absence meant that that strong point also disappeared from our discussion. I'm sorry about that. Time for a break, but then, welcome back. You're watching To The Point. Most people are convinced that the Prime Minister has made up his mind to expand and reshuffle his cabinet, and this is likely to happen on Sunday. So tonight we ask, who's in, who's out, who moves up, and who might be pushed sideways? My guests are 3 of the country's top political analysts. They are the political editor of The Hindu, Verghese George, the political editor of the Business Standard, Aditi Phadnis, and the well-known Asian Age columnist, Akar Patel. Mr. George, first let me ask you, although there are reports on every channel and on every newspaper, and everyone is absolutely convinced this cabinet reshuffle is happening and it's happening on Sunday, do you personally feel sure that this is now definite? Or do you think there's still some room for doubt and that maybe news reporters are getting carried away?
I think after what Manohar Parrikar has spoken in the evening today and what Mr. Chandrababu Naidu has spoken earlier in the day, now it is fairly evident and I am reasonably convinced that it is going to happen. And Sunday is a matter of speculation because Prime Minister is going to be out of town for 2 days starting tomorrow and after, and again from Monday. So Sunday is only window. So there are officials who are indicating that it is going to happen on Sunday afternoon. So I think with these statements, which are very strong indications, particularly from Manohar Parrikar, who said today morning the BJP President Amit Shah called me and asked me to be ready for any assignment that the Prime Minister may give him. So I think it's now reasonably sure that it's going to happen.
Akar Patel, a second question is, do you believe that this will be a fairly major rejig of the cabinet? By which I mean not just a new defence minister, but many new ministers who take up the second portfolios that are at the moment held by people who have double charge, promotions, as well as the induction of people from states like Rajasthan, Maharashtra, Haryana, where for whatever reason the Prime Minister needs to boost up representation. So do you think it will be a fairly major rejig?
I'm going to stick my neck out and say no, that the form that Mr. Modi has shown in Gujarat for a dozen years will likely continue. Small, compact cabinet, lots of portfolios held by ministers of state, overseen directly by Mr. Modi himself. There is, of course, the fact that Mr. Jaitley, when he was sworn in the first time, said that he was holding defence only temporarily. So it's quite certain that that will leave him. And Rajasthan, with only one person in the cabinet, ought really to be given more. Beyond that, I don't think there will be too much of a change.
All right, that's a very interesting counterpoint to the feverish speculation on television this evening. Let's come, Aditi Fadnis, to some points of hot speculation. To begin with, are you fairly certain that Manohar Parrikar is going to be the defence minister? Everyone seems to have jumped to that conclusion, but do you share it? And secondly, is he a good choice?
Well, firstly, Twitter today was full, particularly in the second half of the day, was full of speculation that it is Rajnath Singh who will actually get defence and Manohar Parrikar may move to home. Now, given the circumstances and given the speculation in the past that Parrikar is the right choice for defence, I don't think this holds much water.
Just very quickly, if what you're saying Twitter is speculating about happens and Rajnath gets shifted to defence, would that be a demotion for him?
It would be a lateral movement, but the fact that he will not be acting Prime Minister when the Prime Minister goes abroad, because that is traditionally something handled by the defence, by the Home Minister, sends its own message.
And that handling will thereafter happen in the hands of Parrikar,
who has never been a central cabinet minister, who has only been a home minister, and that too only for, I think, one term in the past.
Verghese George, how likely is it that ministers like Nitin Gadkari, Ravi Shankar Prasad, Prakash Javadekar, Nirmala Sitharaman, Piyush Goyal, all of whom have double charges, could end up losing one of them? Because that's another feverish point of speculation.
I would not speculate what, because I think nobody knows what Modi has in its mind. But at the same time, the case for divesting them of some of these portfolios is very strong, because what Nitin Gadkari is handling was handled by 6 ministers in the previous UPA government. It is humanly impossible for a minister to handle these many portfolios. For instance, the much speculated and much reported and talked about revamp of the NREGA, the National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, is pending only because Nitin Gadkari just does not have the time to attend to it. What Mr. Arun Jaitley has been handling, two heavy ministries, were handled by 2 reasonably efficient ministers in the UPA government who work long hours. So to have these ministers doing this much of work on a daily basis, I don't think it is going to be sustainable. Narendra Modi requires at least half a dozen heavy lifters who will have to handle these crucial ministries for any results to be shown in the medium to immediate terms. Okay. But at the same time, as Mr. Patel said, there is a style that Narendra Modi has been known for, which is having a compact union council of ministers and always being very skeptical about a large number of people around him as ministers. So I think we'll have to balance these contradicting priorities or contradicting requirements of his style and the requirements of the governance.
Akar Patel, another point of pretty feverish speculation is Suresh Prabhu. He is at the moment the Sherpa for the G20 in Australia. It's believed that earlier on in May, Mr. Modi wanted to induct him into the cabinet but couldn't or didn't. Do you think now he will, and do you think he is perhaps a shoo-in for rural development which could be taken away from Gadkari?
I hope so, and I say that because the Hindutva parties, both of them, the BJP and the Sena, don't, because of the nature of their ideology, tend not to attract people with subtle thinking. I think Suresh Prabhu is one of them who does think in a sort of a supple fashion, and I think Mr. Modi could use him. There are, of course, people within the BJP who are good, who are experienced, who are very bright, but Mr. Modi chooses not to use them, either on the pretext that they are too old, Mr. Advani and Mr. Joshi come to mind, or that they are too young, Mr. Varun Gandhi. So I think that he doesn't have much to choose from. Suresh Prabhu certainly is one of the brightest people that he should be looking at.
Aditi Fadnis, your rival paper, the Economic Times, today was speculating that Vasundhara Raje Scindia, the Chief Minister of Rajasthan, could end up joining Mr. Modi's cabinet. I know that it's your rival paper, but that apart, do you think that's credible or likely, or do you think it's a little implausible?
Well, I don't think that the configuration of forces being what they are, I don't think Vasundhara Raje Scindia is going to shift to Delhi. I think she's very comfortable where she is. She is in a position to call the shot. She's got a massive majority which she has engineered, and frankly I don't think she's ready to give all that up.
And I take it she's strong enough to ensure that she's not pushed into Delhi when she doesn't want to take it up.
Oh yeah, oh certainly. I don't think anybody wants to push anybody into Delhi. But on another note, I think it's equally important about the people whom Mr. Modi will have to accommodate. Who meets Mr. Akar Patel's definition of a person who is bright, who has experience and who understands issues.
Name 2 or 3 such people quickly.
Well, Dr. Swami for one. What will he do with Dr. Swami? Dr. Swami has to be accommodated.
Except that Dr. Swami is so outspoken, he could be an embarrassment.
But the fact is that Dr. Swami has been advertising that he is going to be a minister, and he's going to be a very important minister, not just in India, also abroad.
Is there a second name, very quickly?
I mean, Jayant Sinha comes to mind. Jayant Sinha is not experienced.
And certainly the papers and television is speculating about Jayant Sinha. Verghese George, there's a lot of speculation that Nirmala Sitharaman could be promoted to full cabinet rank. There are some people who are speculating, although not to the same extent, that in fact even perhaps Prakash Javadekar could be promoted. Do you believe either or both is a likely person to be promoted?
I think both could be possibilities, because as Mr. Patel pointed out, Modi would look for 2 qualities in a person who would be promoted or inducted. One is loyalty, unquestioning loyalty, and second is supreme efficiency, to the extent of ruthless efficiency. The problem here is that people who are reasonably efficient and who have their own minds may not be all that loyal. There could be, normally in politics, like it happened in the UPA government, there would be compromises. Mrs. Gandhi would tolerate a person who is defiant because he is competent and who is efficient. She would accommodate a person who is less efficient but for other social reasons, for maintaining a representative character for the government. But in this case, both these qualities will have to be in the same person, unquestioningly loyal and very, very efficient.
And you believe that Nirmala Sitharaman and Prakash Javadekar have both qualities?
That Modi will have to choose from.
Do you believe Nirmala Sitharaman and Prakash Javadekar have both qualities? A quick yes?
I think so. I think so.
And therefore they will be, you think, promoted?
Yes, I think so.
Akar Patel, do you see any ministers being dropped?
I think, yes. I would also speculate on Arun Shourie.
Okay. Arun Shourie, you think, is someone who should perhaps be brought into the cabinet. Is that what you were saying, Verghese George?
Yes, I am speculating on it. That is a possibility, because there were speculations in the beginning that Arun Shourie would be inducted. There were various internal issues that may have blocked him, but I think Modi might consider Arun Shourie yet again.
Akar Patel, do you see any ministers being dropped? Or let me phrase that differently. Do you believe there are some ministers who deserve to be dropped regardless of whether that happens?
I'd like most of the cabinet to go. But I think that Mr. Modi's style is to operate in this sort of MBA business model, which has these KRAs, you know, key result areas where the bottom 10th has to be failed each year. I would be surprised if there are ministers who didn't lose their job. I think that there'll probably be weaker leaders, weaker politicians who can't kick up much of a fuss. But I would be very surprised if there's nobody who's dropped at the end of this reshuffle. I would also be very surprised if either Sitaraman or Zavadekar got a bump up. I think the people he trusts, for example, in Gujarat, Amit Bhai Shah, Saurabh Bhai Patel, were kept at the Minister of State level for a decade, and they were very powerful, but they didn't get the rank. So I think people that Mr. Modi likes to work with, he keeps them pretty much in a subordinate place.
That's extremely interesting, if somewhat paradoxical. Those that Mr. Modi likes, he keeps subordinate permanently. What about newcomers? You mentioned Jayant Sinha a moment ago. TV and the newspapers are speculating about Nadda as someone else who could join. Anurag Thakur, Mukhtar Abbas Naqvi. Are all those likely to be brought into government?
I think a lot depends on the on exactly why they are not there in the first place, which is local equations. I think it's quite unlikely that Nadda and Anurag Thakur will both come into government. They are, you know, they are in different camps. The fact that Nadda has just been made Vice President of the BJP initially had suggested that he's going to be given organizational responsibilities. I know the papers are suggesting that he may be brought into government. I don't know. I have my doubts about that.
What about something else, Verghese George? Side by side with the cabinet changes that we're talking about, we know that fairly major shifts in the bureaucracy have taken place. According to one calculation, something like 60 or 70 joint secretaries have been moved around. Certain top secretaries have been moved. The finance ministry, for a start, has got a completely new look altogether. Does this mean that Arun Jaitley's control and authority now has considerably enhanced?
I would not say that. I would say that Arun Jaitley is one person that the Prime Minister would be intrinsically trusting it. But at the same time, the Prime Minister is a manager, and some people say he's a micromanager of things. So he would not want anybody's power within that system to be enhanced disproportionately, or an impression to be given out that somebody is disproportionately close to the Prime Minister and the decision-making process. I think his dealings with all ministers and the party is on a need-to-know basis. Okay. And Arun Jaitley is, of course, a prominent figure in that scheme of things. At the same time, the first part of the thing that you mentioned, the attempt of the Prime Minister will be to achieve an equilibrium with the people around him. That includes the Council of Ministers and the senior bureaucracy, which knows what he wants. Okay. People who he can work closely with. He knows what is to be done, but he needs people to execute it, how it is to be done. It's a managerial question which he is trying to address now.
A very quick question, Akar Patel, because we're running out of time. Arvind Mayaram, the former finance secretary, was first shifted to tourism, then he was shifted to minority affairs. Has he been treated badly? And would that have created some measure of resentment in the civil service? A quick answer.
I don't think the higher bureaucracy should be kept in the job that they want to be in. I think the government is perfectly within its rights to move them around. Mr. Modi has this habit of working very closely with bureaucrats. I think that people he's not particularly comfortable with, either in their outlook or in their Ji Hazuri attitude, he tends to get rid of.
You were nodding with disagreement.
I feel that Mr. Modi is deeply dependent on the bureaucracy. I think a little bit too much. And this is the bureaucracy, the kind of Star Wars or the clash of the titans going on in the bureaucracy. It's the bureaucracy and the top leaders in the bureaucracy who are, you know, settling old scores.
So would the shifting of Mayaram have created resentment?
That's the only answer. I mean, that's the only reason why he was shifted twice. Because the bureaucracy wanted him to be shifted twice and wanted him to be kind of completely under the thumb and their full power be felt by
This is an instance of the Prime Minister not doing what he necessarily wants, but doing it at the behest of the bureaucracy whose loyalty and support he needs. All right, that's a very interesting point. My thanks to you for coming to studio and opening our eyes on this particular interpretation, which, to be honest, I had not come across before. My thanks also to my other guests for joining me. It's time to wrap up this particular edition of To The Point. For me, it's going to be goodbye, but hang on for Rajdeep Sardesai, who's going to be taking you through the 9 o'clock news.